In 1963, Chapman achieved his real goal when he won his first World Championship with the youngest ever champion, the legendary Jim Clark. Chapman rarely acknowledged the contribution of others. Clark was the exception.
Jimmy was, in my opinion, probably the greatest racing driver there's ever been. He's got a very rare combination of a fantastically high intellect, a fantastically high ability, with a tremendous concentration. And I don't think there are any other drivers that, in my experience of Grand Prix racing over the last 10 years, have ever equalled, or ever likely to equal, the sort of total race driver concept that Jimmy was.
They were a partnership. Jimmy could tell Colin what the car needed, Colin could give it to Jimmy, and they worked together in the most incredible way. And I've never saw Colin lose his temper with Jimmy either. They had a most wonderful working relationship.
Clark would drive for no one but Chapman, and Chapman inspired a similar loyalty in all those who worked for him.
He was able to drag out of them a loyalty which was unbelievable, almost robotic, you know. And in a different time, different place, Chapman could have easily been a Hitler. He had that ability, and it was down to charisma.
But he was a terrific motivator. He got more out of you than you thought you could ever do.
You could hate him 1 minute, and the next minute you'd be going, yeah, right, I'll do that, yeah, you know. And he was like that with most people, really. He could charm the birds off the trees. If that's what it took, he'd do it. He'd cry, he'd do anything. Oh, I need money, you know.
He could manipulate me. And I'd go into his office breathing fire and slaughter and saying, there's no way we're going to do it. And I'd come out 5 minutes later saying, we're going to do this. He'd talk me round.
When I was in Ibiza with him, we were on the beach and I had one of those funny wet bike things. Anyway, somebody tipped it over and the engine conked up. Colin took the engine cover off and he's looking at it. And within minutes he had people round him, and within more minutes he was directing people with wrenches to take the engine out. I didn't even know who these people were. I swear that most of the people who were helping didn't even know who he was. He just had that ability to become a leader just by charisma.
Colin Chapman, designer and builder of the Lotus 25, has always been a pioneer. He built his first car while he was still an engineering student. And since then, Colin has come a long way. And his many contributions to motor racing include major developments in suspension and monocoque construction. Colin's personal dynamism has inspired an outstanding group of draftsmen, engineers and mechanics, and has united them into a formidable team, Team Lotus, the team supporting the world champion.
Clark's championship-winning car was a perfect example of Chapman's philosophy. Traditionally, cars had a separate chassis and body. Chapman's monocoque united them in a single unit.
Chapman decided that he would leave out the chassis and he would make a motor car out of a series of fuel tanks built round the driver, in this case Jimmy Clark, perfectly to fit Jimmy Clark. He even said that the oil pipes ran between Jimmy's cheeks in the base of the car, and on this he attached a racing engine and gearbox without any extraneous material at all.
Well, Dick, now we get to the interesting bit. We built the engine onto the car, as you can see.
Yes.
And now we built the rest of the suspension on the back of the engine, because the engine itself is forming part of the structure of the car.
Right.
And, of course, it holds it all together.
He was most emphatic that each part had got to do 3 jobs. Elegant simplicity was the keynote. He always hammered down my throat. It's got to be elegant and it's got to be simple.
I'd now like to take off. Can you clear the track, please?
Roger, will do.
As a world champion, Chapman started to adopt the lifestyle to match.
Well, in the 60s, a lot of people had mistresses and girlfriends. I did. And it was rumoured that Colin had one or perhaps two, but nothing you could really pin down.
By 1964, Colin was really wearing his mistress on his sleeve, very open secret. I'm inclined to think that he just regarded it as another status symbol, another toy, if you like, in the same way that he had to have the latest aeroplane or any other gadget.
Colin had three lives. He had his family life, which was totally divorced from his other two lives. He had his private life, okay, which did not necessarily include his family. Then he had his business life. And he was able to run those three in parallel without them crisscrossing too many times, and organise himself in such a way that he never really come up with a conflict. I mean, occasionally, as I understand it, and this is hearsay, but kind of Hazel left him a couple of times, you know, when things got a bit tough, or, you know, she'd run away for a weekend and to friends, but in general terms, he was able to kind of keep all the balls in the air, and everybody kind of lived happy, kind of.
The obsession with each element doing more than one job even extended to his private life. Once in the 60s, a mistress doubled as a secretary, which brought its own problems in the office.
Why don't you just meet a girl occasionally, you know, to go to dinner, and if you have fun, you have fun. Why do you need to bring all the baggage on board, you know, where, you know, you're walking in the morning, they're out at the office, and, you know, all that. Well, and, right, what a good idea. Why don't we do that? Okay, so what are we going to do with this one? Let's get rid of her. No. You get rid of her. Okay, that's fine. So we have the conversation, and that young lady goes. Anyway, there's some people I knew down in London, an escort agent, and they sent a really pretty girl up. And he was supposed to have dinner with her. And he didn't have the guts, he lacked the confidence to be able to sit down with somebody on his own, and wanted me to go to dinner as well, and I said, no, I'm not going to do that, you know. So in the end, that all kind of went to wash out, and then we had the job of getting the old one back again.
Chapman's closest relationship in his business life came to a tragic end in 1968.
I did get very, very close to Jim Clark. He was, I would say, my best friend I've ever had. We got on terribly well together. I understood exactly what he wanted and so on, and I think he understood exactly what I meant when we conversed on the subject. And this is the tragedy of motor racing, is when you do get close to a driver and there is an accident, of course, it hurts you so much more.
We went to the hospital, and they kept us hanging around for a long time, and nobody saying anything, and then we were ushered into a room, and to my amazement I was offered a glass of, I think, brandy, something fairly stiffening, which I mean, immediately confirmed my worst fears. And then they said, yes, Jimmy Clark is dead.
Driving a Lotus, he crashed into the trees at 140 miles an hour in a minor race he had no need to enter.
Everybody who knew Colin will tell you that he was absolutely desolated by the death of Jim Clark.
I've never seen anyone so low for a guy who was, you know, always on top of everything. He was shattered, you know.
It almost became as if Colin was a widower. He'd lost his partner, and he grieved deeply.
He'd disappeared off the face of the earth for 3 weeks. Nobody knew in the factory or anywhere else where he was. He was lost.